Hello and welcome to another open source workplace video. If this is your first time coming across the channel, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're alerted to all upcoming videos. Today, I'm very happy to welcome back Kyle Tooke from Thoughtwire. Kyle, how are you doing, sir? Good to have you back.
I am doing amazing. Thank you for having me. I had a tremendous Father's Day this past weekend and got to spend it with the Nuggets. So doing quite well. Thank you for asking. How was your Father's Day?
Mine was great. Mine was great. Thank you for asking as well. My dad, as I said, my dad was vertical. I was lying or horizontal. I was lying horizontal. We had a quick chat, and the Premier League started back in the UK, so it's a big thing for us. So we were chatting about the soccer, so it was great to catch up. And but yeah, thank you for asking.
Sure.
And the Nuggets, I love the Nuggets reference. It's really cool, really cute. So I actually before we get on, Kyle, I actually went back and I watched our last video, and I wanted to refresh myself the lessons that you took us through, where you explained what a digital twin is, but more importantly, what it isn't, and the misconceptions around some of those things, and you went into great detail on the types of digital twin that is there, but you also provided some really, really good use cases. And as watching, and I was getting excited about all those ways that a digital twin can be used. And what was going through my head was, it's really good, but how do you do that, right? How do I get to those results? Because that seems like really hard.
Sure. No, and today's buildings they're becoming more and more complex. Whether we're talking about a smart hospital or we're talking about a high rise in downtown Manhattan, or we're talking about an industrial building, there's more and more technologies that are going into these spaces. You have tons and tons of IoT devices, new data points that are getting exposed. And so just trying to wrap your mind around how do I leverage all of this data? Because it's one thing to take a whole bunch of technology and throw it into a building, but if you don't have a cohesive strategy and a vision around that, and I see this all the time. Companies put in smart technologies in their buildings, but it's still siloed data. There's no context around it. There's no reasoning around what's actually happening in real time in the building because everything is still siloed. That's why a lot of organizations are moving towards a digital twins technology stack or a technology platform so that they can understand with context, with reasoning, what's going on in these buildings in real time. How do I operationalize and actionalize that data to impact the performance of the building, how it's operating, how it's being operated, and at the same time, enhance the experience of the occupants of that building, who are real estate organizations' clients, the employees, the tenants, the facility management team, right? And I see a lot of different organizations in different points in their journey towards getting into a modern intelligent building. And you're going to hear 5 million definitions of an intelligent building, but I would say the first step on how you get into a digital twin enabled building portfolio is you got to have the right stakeholders in the conversation. You have to align those stakeholders. Time and time again, I come and I meet with these organizations that are kicking the tires, trying to understand the technology, trying to educate themselves about digital twin. But I'm talking to one engineer, or I'm talking to the CIO or the CTO, or I'm talking to the head of workplace. Very seldomly am I coming into these meetings. I do everything I can to try to orchestrate and get all these people in the room at the same time, but very rarely do I see the head of workplace, HR, head of engineering and facilities, the IT professional who is responsible for building ecosystem. Very rarely are those people in the same room collaborating and aligning towards a vision. So that is what I would say is where you need to start, is identify who are the business stakeholders, who are the people who are responsible for the outcomes and the experience that you want to create, whether we're talking from an employee or a tenant perspective or from a facility and operations perspective. You got to get those people in the same room, get them talking.
And is that because you think different people have different visions of what it is? People put different value or see the opportunity differently? Is that why you think there's not the same buy-in?
Well, I think everyone has their own hats, their own areas of responsibility, and they end up with blinders, and they're just focused on their world, right? But
Mm.
they're working in a larger ecosystem than just their workplace world or their facilities world and operations world or their IT world, and making sure stuff is working and connected, right? but you get, if a company is going to be looking at a ecosystem, a portfolio wide digital strategy, right, and you're exploring a organizational digital twin to be that platform, you need all these stakeholders understanding each other's pain points, understanding. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember this was probably about a year and a half ago. I was talking to a company up in New York, and I was talking to the head of operations, and I was talking to the head of workplace in siloed conversations. And they were both looking for an IoT solution for occupancy and tracking occupancy and density so that they understood how the space was being utilized in case they needed to make adjustments to their floor plate. And they're both looking for pretty much the same technology, but they had no idea. And we're actually looking at acquiring two totally different IoT sensors, which would accomplish the same goal if they were just in the same room talking to each other. That blew my mind. Like, why is that even occurring? If you were in the same room collaborating, understanding what you were trying to do, what your initiatives are for your given use cases of what you're trying to accomplish, you can knock a lot of birds out with, you know, one stone instead of having redundant technologies. But it goes even deeper than that, right? I mean, there's other technologies. If you layer the data between multiple systems and you understand the use cases and where you're trying to get to and that experience you're trying to curate, you can get there, but you got to understand the perspectives of the other parties that are going to be involved in this built environment. And in order for you to really align and get to where you want to be, and you know, you can raise all ships if you're all aligned on what you need to do.
So I have the 4 players in the room and you come in. What should be my next step?
Well, the next start, you got to have a vision, right? What is that experience that you're trying to curate? So this comes into a couple of different areas, right? So it's defining what are the use cases, right? What are the outcomes? What are the workflows? What are the and right now, I mean, we like to talk about it really around call it the 4 S's. So safety, security, sustainability. And right now, you know, all the COVID use cases, for example, is a perfect, you know, when around safety, right? Is it a safe workplace? How do I know it's a safe workplace? How do I validate that from my tenant base or my employee base that they're working in a safe environment? The sustainability one is pretty self-explanatory, you know, energy and, you know, making sure that the building is performing at an optimal level at all times dynamically as the environment is changing. Security, another, you know, cybersecurity, making sure the data is protected, all the assets protected, you know, making sure that we don't have outside threats coming in and compromising our data and exposing our clients or sensitive information. So you got a lot of different things there, but each of those things that I talked about requires multiple stakeholders, multiple people collaborating. So creating the vision of the building that you're in now, and you have brownfield, so you have previous existing buildings, which is the majority of projects out there. You know, you look at Manhattan, pretty much everything is built. It's they're older buildings. And then you have your new builds, these new corporate campuses, these new corporate headquarters in the major metros. And, you know, if you can start with a new building and start to design infrastructure and help provide guidance to these organizations around starting with the people, right? And this is every consulting engagement that we get involved in. We always start with the people. You know, that is the customer, right? Whether we're talking tenants, employees for a corporate or enterprise company, facilities, security, the end users, those are the customers, right? So how do I create a common experience, regardless of persona, across the entire portfolio, regardless of underlying technology? And if you start with the people, all right, and then for the individual, what does that day in the life look like? Whether I'm an operator or I'm an employee, right? What do those experiences need to look like? What are the outcomes? What are the use cases? So you go from your client to outcomes and use cases and defining those. Have that vision. All right, now what data do I have to enable those outcomes and those use cases, right? So who owns that data, or where does that data reside? Where's the originator of that data? So you get into your IT, your OT, your IoT systems, your third-party systems that are out there, your third-party data sources like DOT and weather, right? So then you get at, okay, the underlying technologies where these data points are residing, and we look at how do I get the data out of that into this central digital twin repository, right? So You got to have a partner who has a very robust connector factory. You're going to find different vendors out there that have very sophisticated, very robust libraries of connectors that will enable you to have two-way communication with these underlying technologies. You're going to have some that are on the other extreme that they'll link into your BAS, your lighting, maybe a couple other systems, but may not be able to do it all. Then you have to understand, okay, well, what are the things that I want to do with that data? And do I have the underlying functionality with this vendor partner to achieve them? So bi-directional controls, am I able to, through a digital twin, am I able to dictate controls back to the BAS with dynamic set points? Am I able to tell the lighting system to dim or make sure that the lights are in eco mode versus non-eco mode? How do I have visibility into that? How do I monitor that? How do I dictate the rules on how that environment needs to behave? And that goes all the way to elevators, to UPS, to everything in the building, right? So your main next step is creating a vision of the experience based on persona, right? And then working from the client, being the employee, the tenant, the facility manager, working back into use cases and outcomes to where's the data sit, what's the underlying technologies, and then do I have the vendor partner who has the ability to connect and aggregate that data, normalize it, and allow other technologies, other power users, other individuals who have other products and use cases within that environment to take advantage of that normalized data. So that's the next step, is how do you create this vision of an ecosystem?
And I'm going to ask this question because it's something I know I do frequently. So I will look at something, I take your idea, and I'll try and get to the nth version of what that is. And I know the technology isn't there, and I know probably that's my fault, and it's a bad way to look at this stuff. So it's like, how do we look at things, or how do you educate people to take one step at a time, but understand that big vision is going to take place eventually, but it may not happen in the first or second iteration?
Sure. So there's a couple things here that I would speak to. So, speaking on Thoughtwire's behalf on this, we're an agile shop and we look at time to value on use cases. So when I engage with an organization, I'm looking at, what technologies are already in place today, right? And if it's a new build, what things are commissioned, what things are IP enabled and ready to go that I can plug in and I can immediately start providing value back to the client. So we always look at time to value when we implement, and you don't have to conquer the world. It's more often than not, it's a phased project. It's a phased approach. So, if you have your BAS, your lighting, your elevator, whatever technologies ready to go, they're commissioned, and we're ready to plug in, we can go ahead and identify what use cases are leveraging what underlying technologies and enact those and implement those first, right? And then you may have some things that may involve a parking system, an intelligent parking system, and you have specific workflows around parking, right? That may be a day 2 or a day 3, right? So we're going to provide some of that guidance to our clients in the get-go. But this goes into the next thing that I would encourage companies to look at, which is you need to really identify and find the right partner to help hold your hand and guide you through this. And I'm not talking about Thoughtwire as a vendor. I'm talking about an engineering consulting firm, some of the MSIs and MEP shops out there that specialize in next generation data models and digital twins. And it's not always the big guys. So I would caution you, if you're going to evaluate a engineering consulting firm to help you along this journey, it's not always the big guys that have the knowledge around the latest and greatest technology. There are mid-sized and smaller engineering firms that have invested a significant amount of time in reaching out to vendors like Thoughtwire to understand the technology, understand the use cases and outcomes of what could be. So then they can in turn help guide organizations, enterprise corporates, owner operators into a more modern understanding or a modern technology ecosystem than what even some of the big shops are still pushing out there. A lot of shops are still pushing companies to enterprise building automation systems. Well, that creates vendor lock. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of things that hinder flexibility. It hinders scalability for these enterprise companies that have a global portfolio, and there's no way for them to standardize their BAS and their infrastructure. So you got to have something like an organizational digital twin that can plug into any of those environments and has the connectors to integrate with any of those underlying technologies that aren't standardized. So that would be my other thing is find an engineering consulting partner who's done it before, who's worked in very complex things. The ones that have focused in healthcare before, they know their stuff. They've been there, and they've got a wealth of knowledge around very complex environments, more complex than anything you're going to see in a high rise in downtown Manhattan for sure. And then I would also, look at what are the other ecosystem types of projects that they've actually accomplished and executed on. Go visit those sites, see what they've done. But that would be my next thing is once you have your stakeholders aligned, your vision created, find that engineering partner who can help you create that vision, because they're very good at doing that. They'll curate your Division 25s and make sure that you have a strong vision that's going to carry you 5, 10, 15 years and for the foreseeable future. And if you have someone who is pushing you down the path of digital twin, you're going to be able to adopt new technologies, not only, today and tomorrow, but 15 years from now, and not have to rip and replace.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to mention, right? Because that's the concern, right? It's a bit like you buy something today. How do you know it's got a useful life beyond 2-3 years or to the next iteration in the technology becomes available?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a key component of how we operate and the way that our architecture is structured, Steve, is to make sure that any partner that we have, they're going to have new technology, new things they're going to try to adopt, 7 years from now. We need to be able to immediately identify those new assets, that new technology, and start pulling data from it and start layering that into the KPIs and use cases that they're wanting to enact for that property. Another thing that I would encourage companies to do is, once you've identified that consulting firm, one of the key services that they can help you with is taking inventory of your technology infrastructure for a single building or global portfolio, right? So you need to take inventory of that. And then one of the things that you need before you really adopt a digital twin is making sure that you are curating this ecosystem for interoperability, for freedom of data and data portability. There's a lot of vendors out there that they charge tolls for you to have access to their data. Is that the right partner for your global ecosystem? Maybe. But, my mindset around this is freedom of data, doing what's best for the client's ecosystem. And if having to pay a toll to integrate with the underlying technology, I think that's counter towards where technology and where industry needs to go. I think you need to empower the client to have flexibility of choice and ownership of their data. I have zero interest in having ownership of my client's data. So I want them to be able to leverage it, utilize it however they see fit. And they shouldn't have to come back to me and pay a toll for access to that data to use how they see fit. And they shouldn't have to pay a toll for them to take data from one source and bring it into my platform, right? So that's something else that I would make sure that when you're doing your inventory of these different environments in your portfolio is make sure you're picking the right underlying technology partners that speak the same language, that also agree with freedom of data, the ownership of data residing with the client, and making sure that that data can flow freely between the technology stacks.
That's great. That's great, Kyle. Look, as always, thank you. I appreciate your insights, appreciate your education and your willingness to share with Open Source Workplace viewers. Thank you, man.
Thank you. As always, take care, Steve.